welcome back to my channel. It's time for my second Q&A video. So I've got the questions pulled up on my phone. I'm recording this on my camera. If it seems different to usual, it's because I don't really know how to use my camera, which is why I usually use my phone. But I've got the questions pulled up on my phone, and let's see if we can go ahead and answer a few. So first one, Julie Haynes would like to know, how did you and your mum end up living in Bristol, as I think you mentioned you were born in Market Harbour, which is near where I am. I was born in Market Harbour. My family are all from the Midlands, and I was born in, I was actually born in Leicester General, but we lived in Market Harbour until I was 4 years old, and my mum remarried, so my natural father left when I was a year old, and I've never known him. But my mum remarried to the man who I've always referred to as Dad, so when you hear me talking about my dad, that's who I mean. And his job, he worked as a casino manager. They offered him, they wanted to transfer, they wanted to move away from my mum's family. I don't think I can hurt anybody by saying this because my grandparents are long gone now, but my maternal grandmother was a rather controlling woman, and she had taken quite a strong part in my upbringing up to the age of 4, and I was rather spoiled. And my parents wanted to make a fresh start, basically. They didn't want to start their married life under the control of my grandmother, shall we say. They wanted a fresh start, and so they so Dad's company, he currently, at that point I think he worked for Ladbrokes Casinos, and they offered him the chance for transfer, and they offered him Aberdeen or Bristol, and Mum did not fancy Aberdeen. She did not fancy going that far north. It would be cold, and you know, she would struggle with the accent and so on and so forth, and Bristol was only 130 miles south, which was a more manageable distance if she wanted to go back and visit and so on and so forth. So Bristol it was. So we moved to Yate, which is on the outskirts of Bristol. It used to be 30 miles away from Bristol, but as Bristol has sprawled outwards and Yate has grown as well, you come out of Yate almost straight into Bristol these days. So yeah, we moved to Yate and we lived there until I was 12, and then we moved further into the city. My dad left the casino, they bought a newsagent shop, and so we moved we were 3 miles from the centre, so the suburbs really, when I was 12, and I lived there until I left home at 16. So that's how we ended up in Bristol. It's not a very exciting story. My heart stayed in Market Harbour, if I'm honest. Sorry, Molly's here, just in case you're wondering. My heart stayed in Market Harbour, and I didn't really ever feel settled until I moved out of home and got my own place, I think. Good girl, Molly. So there we go, that's how we came to be in Bristol. And of course Dad was here, so Mum's still here with me, but Dad passed away last October. So it's just me and Mum here now. The other Heather asks, would you ever travel to the States, and if so, what areas are you interested in, and is Anthony enjoying van life? So 2 questions there really. Would I ever, well, 3 questions really. Would I ever travel to the States? I would love to travel to the States one day, although I don't think, obviously nobody's travelling anywhere right now. We're still, while I'm filming this, we're still in the middle of the lockdown. We're in week 6 of the UK lockdown. And of course there's no travel at the moment anywhere, but one day I'd love to travel to the States. I'm not remotely interested in Disneyland and things like that, that's just not my cup of tea, but I would like to travel to the south. I quite like the idea of redneck country. I quite like the idea of having a look around redneck country. I'd love to see Loring a wilder country, you know, for a Little House on the Prairie, that kind of thing. I'd also quite like to go to California and you know, and get some decent weather and see the beaches and so on and so forth. I'm not particularly interested in city breaks. I've never particularly felt that I'd like to go to New York, for example. To me, one city is much like another. They're big, loud, smelly and full of people, and I realise that that's a very blinkered view, but it's still the view I've got. Is Anthony enjoying van life? Yes, he is. His van is currently on the driveway because obviously, you know, even if you live in a van, you're not supposed to be travelling around a lot at the moment. But he is enjoying living in the van, definitely. Helen Olson says, if you had a boat, what would you name it? Now there's a question. I've never considered owning a boat. I wouldn't mind a canal boat, you know, like a barge. I don't think I'd like a yacht. I don't see myself skimming around on a luxury yacht, although if it came with luxury staff, maybe. That wasn't the question, was it? The question wasn't what kind of boat do you want. The question was what would you call it? I would call it... Oh, I'd call it the Wandering Waffler. There we go. Isn't that a brilliant name for it? I'm going to go and live on a barge and I'm going to call it the Wandering Waffler. I think that's it. That's my future. Right there. Okay. Jane Barrow says, which 3 things are you most looking forward to when all lockdown restrictions have been lifted? I am looking forward to seeing family freely and friends, you know, being able to just see people on a whim. I'm really looking forward to being able to take Mum out again because she's so bloody bored, bless her. So really looking forward to being able to take her out, and we're going to have some days out and things like that as soon as we're able. And I'm really looking forward, it sounds so trivial, really looking forward to picking food off a menu and having somebody bring me it on a plate and take the plate away again afterwards. Really looking forward to that. I ate out a lot before lockdown, only cheap meals, you know, I'm not a gourmet foodie. I don't spend all my time in you know, in posh restaurants. I go to the pub for lunch and stuff like that, and I liked it and I didn't want to stop it. It wasn't something I ever felt that I should do less of, and now I'm not doing any of it and I want it back. Okay. Oh, Lisa Stenson says, hi Carla, my question is, would you ever consider writing a book, and if so, what type of book would it be? Well, it's funny you should say that, Lisa, because I started a book. I'm going to say probably 10 years ago I started a book, and it was chick lit. At the time, chick lit was what I read most of. Now I do still read some chick lit, but not as much as I used to. And I started a book then, and the thing is with chick lit, it's fairly formulaic. So I started my formulaic chick lit book, and even I didn't find it very interesting. I was boring myself with it, and I started, this isn't, and now I got a couple of friends to read it, and they both said it was good, and they'd like to know what happened next, but I didn't think it was too formulaic, it was too standard, and so I abandoned it. It sits there in the bedside drawer waiting for me to pick it up and do a bit more of it one day maybe. But so it turns out that the kind of book I thought I'd read isn't the kind of book I want. The kind of book I thought I could write isn't the kind of book I want to write, and I don't know what else I would write. I mean, I read a lot of detective fiction, but I don't think I could write one. I don't think I could do the twists and the red herrings and things that you need in detective fiction to keep the reader busy. I think the reader likes to be able to spot the criminal before the police find them. You know what I mean? I think that's one of the things in detective fiction that we like to feel that we got there first. But I don't know if I've got one of those in me or not. Failing that, I used to write poems when I was much younger. Funny poems, not. You know, I'm not Wordsworth or Browning, obviously, but, you know, humorous verse I used to write, so maybe I could do a book of humorous verse one day. Would you buy it? Shall I publish? Shall I self-publish humorous verse, and you can all rush out and buy it and make me into a trillionaire? How does that sound? Okay, so Susan Craig says, as I'm relatively new to your channel, I'd love to know more about your previous life, jobs, etc. Hope it's not too intrusive, not intrusive at all. I haven't had a previous life, I'm still in this one, I've just had the one. I've been a single parent for a long time now. Anthony's 29. I left home at 16 to live with Anthony's dad. I was in a hurry to leave home. I wasn't particularly happy at home in my teenage years, and I was in a hurry to embrace my freedom. So Anthony's dad and I moved out, and we rented a flat and then a house, and then eventually we got a council tenancy. And we broke up when Anthony was 4 months old, for everybody's good, to be honest. So you'll be surprised to know, I'm quite a stubborn, strong-willed person, and I have a tendency to be bossy. I know that's going to come as a huge shock. Tendency to be bossy and domineering. And Anthony's dad had a tendency to be exactly the opposite. He was quite a meek character. He was a very nice lad, but he was willing to be bossed around, and that's not good. It's not good for a bossy person to find someone who's willing to be bossed, because one of the unfortunate traits of a bossy person's character is that you then have no respect for the person who's allowing themselves to be bossed. Now, there's no logic in that, and I realised that. And I was going to make Anthony's dad very unhappy if we stayed together. I could feel that I was going to become one of those very hectoring, domineering misses who who just spend all their time nagging their bloke and having a go at him for no reason and making the poor man. He was going to be henpecked. I was going to be horrible. He was going to be henpecked. Anthony was going to be unhappy. So we broke up, and 5 years later, I met Natalie's dad, and that was a very brief relationship. I got pregnant with Natalie too soon, really. I should have got to know her dad a lot better first. However, I don't have any regrets because I love her so much and I wouldn't change her in any way. So, but we didn't stay together. And so I've been on my own with the kids ever since. A couple of brief relationships that didn't work out, and eventually I went, you know what, this just isn't working. I'm just better off on my own. I'll just get on with it, you know. So, as a single parent, I've done lots of part-time, low-paid, fit-in round the kids' jobs. So I've worked in almost every kind of shop you can imagine. I ran a cafe at one point. I worked nights in a garage, a petrol station, I can't change a tyre, let alone mend a car. A filling station garage. I worked in a garden shop. I worked in several cafes, and then I found my niche when I joined Ann Summers. So I joined Ann Summers in 2004, and became a team leader with them a year later, and stayed with them for 10 years and thoroughly enjoyed it. It was definitely the right job for me for those years. And after that I did Body Shop for a while. Again, I was quite successful at Body Shop. I didn't enjoy it quite as much. It wasn't as much fun as Ann Summers. But eventually I reached the point where I just didn't want to go out in the evenings anymore. I reached the point where I should be building myself up to go out and work. I was like, I just want to stay home and relax now. And so I gave up Party Plan, and then I ran a cafe for a while. So the cafe slots in after that. And running the cafe almost gave me a nervous breakdown, not because of the job itself, but because of the man who owned the cafe, and the working for that man nearly took me over the edge into a nervous breakdown. And so I left and went full-time with eBay. Had done eBay behind those things all of those years. I've been on eBay since 2003. I think my eBay account is 2003, and so all of these years I've been doing eBay as a backstage thing, a little bit here, a little bit there, and then about 5 years ago I went full-time. I think it was 2015 I went full-time with eBay, and never looked back. Obviously now I'm a squillionaire. Started YouTube a few years ago, and obviously that brings me in £1 million a month as well. So now I've got more money than I can shake a stick at, and I'm ecstatically happy. Belinda Chapman asks 2 questions. How long have you been an eBay seller for, and what did you do prior to that? Well, I think I've just answered those, Belinda. So there you go. Kate Kinder would like to know, what would be your perfect day out? Well, it's funny that should be asked now. I mean, this was 2 weeks ago that this was asked, and so we're in lockdown when Kate asked that. And I think Kate's in New Zealand, and I know that the New Zealand government have dealt with it very differently, in that they don't have the huge issue that we have. I don't know if they have the lockdown situation, but I know that they don't have the huge pandemic issue that we have there. So perhaps they're not experiencing the lack of days out that we're experiencing. Right now, my ideal day out would simply be to meet up with Lex, Caroline, and just have a day out round the charity shops and lunch in a pub, exactly how we used to do, exactly what I miss doing. So that would be lovely. But that's just how I feel right now. If you'd asked me the question before lockdown, well, I was doing those things anyway, perhaps my ideal day out might have been a trip to the coast, lunch out on a boat somewhere. Just something very, very relaxing. Just chill out time. Just chill time is what we're now. And now, of course, we've all got more chill out time than we know what to do with. Okay, and we've got some questions from Steph Hughes. So she'd like to know, what does Nat do for a job? Nat is a support worker. She works with adults who, for varying reasons, cannot live unsupported. They need someone there to help guide them through the intricacies of life. And she does that extremely well, funnily enough. She's far more patient and caring and useful than I am, far more. She asks, are your kids half siblings? Well, as I've answered earlier on, yeah, they've got 2 different dads. We don't call them halves. I don't mean that as a criticism of the way you phrase it. That's not what I mean at all. But to me, they've lived together, they've been brought up together, they are brother and sister. Whereas Natalie has other half brothers and sisters who haven't been brought up here, and we do call those halves. So if I think of, although Natalie doesn't, There's the thing. Natalie never refers to my half-sister. She always calls them my sister, my brother. It's me who thinks of them as half. Now, there's an interesting psychological thing. I think of them as halves because they're not mine. But I don't think of Anthony and Natalie as being halves because they're both mine. That's interesting. I shall analyse that further within my head at some point. And Steph also said, did you know that accommodation over water, because I talked about like wanting one of those beach huts that are over the sea. They're not really beach huts, are they? They're sea huts. One of those hotel rooms that are built on stilts in the water. Did you know that accommodation over water is easily available in the Pacific Islands, e.g. Fiji, Samoa and Tahiti? And she's happy to put me up in New Zealand if when I transit to any of those destinations. Thank you, Steph. I'll turn up one day with a rucksack. You'll be like, oh God, she's here. And Deborah51 says, my question is, are you superstitious? Would you ever walk under a ladder? I wouldn't. I'm not particularly superstitious. I think we all have those things that we are used to saying, like touch wood or whatever. And I do say those things, but I don't really touch wood in the belief that it will protect me in any way. I wouldn't walk under a ladder, not because of superstition, but because I would be worried that somebody was up there and would fall on me or drop a tin of paint on me, or that I might knock the ladder and knock someone off it. I would avoid walking under a ladder for safety purposes rather than for superstition. And yet I salute magpies if I see a single one. And it's habit, it's not really belief. It's not really belief that I think one magpie will bring me bad luck. I think it's just the stuff that we've all grown up with and we're used to doing. But no, I'm not superstitious, really. Oh, and that's the last one. That's it. That's the last question. So thank you for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed this. Feel free to subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I'd love to have new subscribers. I'm approaching 3,000 subs, and I may have got there before you see this video. But do still subscribe, because you know after 3 comes 4, and we're aiming towards 100,000, so I can get one of those YouTube plaques. And I'm only 97,000 subs away from that, so it should be any day now. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Do watch some other stuff if you have, and I will be back soon with something else. Who knows what. Take care. Bye bye.